Irishman one day. As the streets were paved with gold, sure everyone was gay, singing songs at Piccadilly, Strand and Leicester Square.
He knew with this thick beard upon his chin and chest, he looked like a man. He wanted to be a soldier, although he was only 16 years old. He was tall, but not thin. And he knew without that beard that he would not be allowed to become a soldier. But now he was on his way, on this busy express train, taking young men from all over the country, all over the British Empire, to come and be soldiers. He'd studied hard at school. Everyone said that it was a waste of time, but he could sit and he could read the newspaper. And every day the information that he saw made him scared and excited at one and the same time. But he felt that he could not stay in Tipperary. He was going to save his country. But if you were to ask his friends and family, they were angry that he was going to fight on the side of the English. Looking out of the carriage window at the storm-filled clouds and the summer lightning on an August day, he knew it was his father's birthday, and this was no present to give to him. On board of that train, everyone was singing out of tune and songs that he'd never heard before, different accents, and when he spoke, people thought that he was speaking in a foreign language. They asked him which part of Germany he was from, which part of Switzerland he was from. But when they found out that he was Irish, and he'd been strong and good, and he could have been a champion, when he played at school, he was very good at sport, but now sitting writing with his father's pen, he did not know what his girlfriend was going to say when she found out that he had left Tipperary. He was going to fight in this war. Many years later, his body was found, three bullets in his heart, there on the barbed wire by the front of the Italian front. In his pocket there was something that he would never have written, never have sent. And when it arrived back in Tipperary, it was a love letter to Molly, telling her that when he returned, they would live in a land that was filled with peace. It was blood-stained, and she looked at it and kept it a full 50 years, and would look at it upon every November and remember him.
My heart, right there. Paddy wrote a letter to his Irish Molly, oh. Should he not receive it, write and let me know. If I make mistakes in spelling, Molly dear, said he, remember it's the pen that's bad, don't lay the blame on me. It's a long way to Tipperary, it's a long way to go. It's a long way to Tipperary, to the sweetest girl I know. Goodbye Piccadilly, farewell Leicester Square. It's a long, long way to Tipperary, but my heart's right there. If you want to find the Sergeant Major, I know where he is, I know where he is, I know where he is. If you want to find the Sergeant Major, I know where he is. He's boozing up the private room. I've seen him, boozing up the private room. I've seen him, boozing up the private room.
He was a farm boy, and he had been all of his life. And he'd always wanted to see more of life and more of this world. But now he found himself in a hospital, wounded. He was a German boy, small for his age, but confident. He did not have enough to eat, even though he lived upon a farm. He could have as many eggs as he wanted, for there was never a shortage of eggs. But he'd thought that he was protecting his country, protecting his farm. And when he'd seen the English advance and they'd thrown a grenade, he was used to seeing German grenades on a long, thin wooden stick, but this was like a man's fist, and he'd picked it up and thrown it on a damp and drizzly winter's night. He'd thrown it as far as he could, but as it had gone through the air, It had torn through the bones and sinews of his arm, and now he lay there, losing blood. The blood was being sponged away from him with a sponge that was dripping with his and other people's blood. And he touched the bandage. He wondered if he'd ever be able to work again. But he could see this shrapnel pointing out from the side of his arm. And he wondered if these people, these surgeons, these doctors, the enemy, would fix him and make him better. There was a commotion amongst all of the beds. He saw a man, stiff, tall, straight and strong, a thin moustache upon his lip, and most of the men turned their backs towards him. They were grumbling and muttering. He's always drunk, always stealing the rum. He never goes over the top. He never fights. And then they couldn't believe it. They looked at him. He looked down at this boy, this small boy, bleeding from his arm. So, sonny, you thought that you would take it up as an army man, would you? So young, the boy did not understand what he said, but he knew what he meant. Well, once we've treated you, you'll be allowed to let go. And here, the men, who'd never seen the sergeant major do anything kind or to help anyone, they gasped as he pulled a bottle from the pack at his back and placed some rum upon the small boy's lips. You'll be treated. You'll be good. Don't ever let me see you again. They realised, after all of the times that they'd been thinking that the sergeant major had stolen their rum, he was coming into the hospital and he was giving it to those who needed it more. When the boy was full and well and good again, fuller, stronger than he'd been before he'd come into this hospital, they watched the sergeant major give him a bag, and inside of the bag there was a bottle of rum. That'll make a man of you, said the sergeant major as he patted the boy, and off he went. But he had to go across the fields, the dark fields, the muddy fields, the fields that were filled with blood and death. When he heard a bullet going, this boy hid down into a dugout. He was there. He'd had a sergeant major's coat around his back to keep him warm, and a young boy soldier from the Germans came over the top, and all he saw was his uniform. You could see this boy, he didn't think he's too young to be a soldier. All he saw was a jacket to keep him warm, given to him by the sergeant major. That bullet pierced the boy's heart. For a second he looked and thought, seems a bit young, but when he saw the bag, he sat down by this dying figure of the boy and tasted the rum and smiled.